very pretentiously, I've called my thing the interruption of education, because I'm from the horrible world of e-learning. And really what that's about, it's about a tension between two communities, whereas on one hand you've got kind of rigid structures of formal education, and the desire to create one's own communities where you can learn or you can do whatever you like, really. And obviously the context here is learning and learning context. And we also see some of these tensions played out in the world of commercial software and the LSS communities as well. So as I said, I come from my professional life anyway, from a traditional publisher where the pattern's been to make something, because we're the experts, and to chuck it out there, sell it to a defined audience via some very predefined channels. So that would mean schools, local authorities. I mean, that's just good capitalist practice. Obviously this can't go on. And what we've reached now is an apex, or is it an nadir, I don't know, of what's a creative and social and historical and educational tension. And this is where I see that interruption actually taking place. Now we've got things like government prescribed technology frameworks, Vector, for education, and they're sort of up against these self-formed, self-motivated networks that young people have set up for themselves, proving to everyone quite clearly that sort of state-driven or state-owned education is really an aside for them, if you like. So if, for instance, we take time, the notion of time, as one of the cultural values that's being used as a tool of imposition, and by that, in this context, I mean the need to complete a course or an assessment within a certain period. You can see here that there's a growing resentment, if you like, that communities are not allowed to view and use time as a creative tool in itself, of itself, for themselves. So I think one of the problems as we move through time, if you like, is that our consciousness of time is increasingly microscopic and monochrome. By that I mean that we can only understand and value time that's actually already been defined for us. And again, by that I would mean like the school lesson, or the financial year, the financial quarter, or the half-hourly news bulletin, or now the rolling news bulletin. So in fact, the kind of non-stop information age defines our value of time. And yet we've actually got difficulty thinking long-term. And now I'm going to make reference to my ideal husband, who is Brian Eno. My second ideal husband is Ray Mears, so judge it what you will. Weird. Brian Eno is involved in a project called The Long Now, with a group of various thinkers, and they've created something, the clock of the long now. And they measure time, not in seconds, minutes, hours, but in thousands of years. And if you want to see this, there's actually an example of it in the Science Museum down the road, or you could go to the Nevada Desert. And in the clock of the long now, the bells actually chime every 500, every 1,000 years. So that sort of gives you a different perspective on thinking about time, which I think is quite creative. So to go back to the kind of overview, philosophically you could say that what we've got here is a dialectic, and this is my very crappy, clumsy definition from sort of degree time 20 years ago or something. But what we've actually got is two seemingly opposite sides. Okay, where you've got a prevailing hegemony which kind of seeks to authorise through a jurisdiction, whether that's standards or qualifications or whatever, or a legal stamp, and you've got an emerging cultural shift which has grown sort of like alien in the belly, sort of within the main body, but now it's kind of seeking its own existence. So if we're still speaking philosophically, which I'm attempting to very badly, then one would hope that from that dialectic a new way of thinking could emerge. So the question now is what happens to this sort of wrestling match? And just picking up on the two previous speakers, well, it's really weird because I've kind of sort of, I've constantly referred to history as well. Because if you look to history, the example I would point to would be the Enlightenment, where the interruption was caused by political and social change, together with the revelations of the kind of new scientific method and discoveries. Or you could also point to the battle between ancients and moderns, and actually the book I was reading on the train was Jonathan Swift. I was reading the essay called The Battle of the Books. I don't know if anyone knows it. Basically what happens there is the existing canon of approved information was threatened by the arrival in the library of the new information, the sort of little boys who came swaggering in. And I think we can see kind of parallels in those arguments raging between the kind of the commercial world and, if you like, the open source social collaboration world today. And I'll just give you a quick quote from that essay, where a spider speaking to a bee, and the spider in this scenario is the big boy, the traditional world, and the bee is the new kind of swaggering thug. And the quote is, "Your livelihood is a universal plunder on nature, a freebooter over fields and gardens, and for the sake of stealing will rob a nettle as easily as a violet. Whereas I am a domestic animal furnished with a native stock within myself. This large castle is all built with my own hands and the materials extracted altogether out of my own purse." Ooh. So if you drag things back down to the world of Mammon, away from kind of literature and philosophy, the questions I'd like to ask, which I'm sure you'll like to, are where will this tension take us, and how will communities be created where this tension exists because of, in spite of, in between, or whatever? And pragmatically, how does practice need to change the corporate world so that this can actually happen? And what I nearly said there was allow this to happen, but actually we know that this won't be the case. It's the self-formed communities who will allow this sort of organisations to change themselves. So basically, is it sink or swim for those big boys, or will the Lilliputians take control?
Okay.